The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched so far that its walls disappeared into a manufactured twilight. Representatives from 73 species sat in their designated pods, each one floating at a precise height that denoted their species' status in the cosmic hierarchy. The air hummed with translation fields, turning the clicks, whistles, and growls of 1,000 different languages into something each species could understand. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the center of the chamber floor, a small figure in a simple gray suit. Around her, the council members shifted in their pods with barely concealed amusement. Some made sounds that the translation fields rendered as laughter. Others simply stared at her with their various arrangements of eyes, antennae, and sensory organs. She had just finished reading Earth's formal declaration. The document was short, direct, and according to the council's reaction, utterly ridiculous. "Let me understand this correctly," Speaker Tom Von said, his three-part beak clicking in what passed for Avarian amusement. "Your species, which achieved faster-than-light travel merely 80 of your years ago, wishes to claim exclusive rights to a sphere of space 50 light-years in diameter around your home system." "That is correct," Chen said. Her voice was steady, calm, and carried no hint of the nervousness one might expect from someone representing such a young species before the most powerful political body in the known galaxy. "And you expect all spacefaring species to honor this exclusion zone?" Tom Von's tone made it clear what he thought of the idea. "We expect all spacefaring species to avoid this region." "Yes," Chen replied. The chamber erupted in sounds that the translation field struggled to process. Laughter, certainly. Disbelief. Outrage from some of the more aggressive species who saw this as an insult to the established order. Ambassador Chen waited. She did not fidget. She did not look away from the speaker's pod. She simply stood there, hands clasped behind her back, while the council members expressed their opinions of humanity's audacity. Finally, Tom Von raised one wing arm for silence. The chamber gradually quieted, though the undercurrent of amusement remained. "Ambassador Chen," he said, "your species controls 12 colonies. 12. The Zitharan Empire controls 47 star systems. The Marine Collective spans 300 worlds. Even the youngest species on this council, besides your own, has been traveling the stars for 600 years. What possible justification do you have for such a demand?" "We are not demanding," Chen said. "We are informing. There is a difference." A new voice cut through the chamber, deep and resonant with the kind of authority that came from conquest. "Informing? Or threatening?" All eyes turned to the Zitharan pod. High Commander Velksoth leaned forward, his massive frame filling the viewing screen. Zitharans were large, even by galactic standards, with thick armored hides and 4 powerful arms. They had built their empire through military might, and they viewed any challenge to their authority as an invitation to demonstrate their superiority. "We are not threatening anyone," Chen said, turning to face the Zitharan pod. "We are establishing a boundary."
"We ask that all species respect it. Ask?"
Velksoth's mandibles spread in what his species used for a smile. "You ask nothing. You stand before this council and declare that a massive region of space belongs to your infant civilization, and expect us to simply comply?" "Yes," Chen said simply. The High Commander laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "And if we refuse? Will your 12 little colonies wage war against the galaxy? We hope it does not come to that." "Hope." Velksoth stood, his full height impressive even through the holographic projection. "Let me tell you what I think of your hope, human. The Zitharan Empire has conquered species with technology far beyond your own. We have shattered fleets 10 times the size of your entire space navy, and you think you can dictate where we may or may not travel." Chen's expression did not change. "Commander Velksoth, I would strongly advise—" "You advise nothing." The Zitharan's roar echoed through the chamber. "The traditional trade route between Zitharan space and the Outer Rim passes directly through your so-called exclusion zone. It has been used for 3,000 years. Do you truly believe we will alter our course because a species that still uses fusion drives asks us politely?" "The route can be adjusted," Chen said. "It would add perhaps 6 days to the journey. A small inconvenience compared to—" "Compared to what?" "Compared to insulting the Zitharan Empire by suggesting we must go around your pitiful territory." Velxoth's forearms spread wide. No, Ambassador Chen. I will not adjust our route. In fact, I believe it is time someone taught your species its proper place in the galactic order. The chamber went silent. Even the species that had been laughing moments before now watched with sudden interest. Velxoth's words were not mere posturing. When a Zitharan High Commander spoke of teaching lessons, fleets usually followed. Commander, Tomvan said carefully, perhaps we should discuss this matter in a more diplomatic. There is nothing to discuss, Velxoth interrupted. In 3 of your months, the Zitharan trade fleet will pass through the human exclusion zone on our traditional route. If the humans wish to object, they are welcome to try. I suspect they will learn quickly why young species listen when their elders speak. He cut the transmission. His pod went dark. Chen stood motionless in the center of the chamber. Around her, council members began speaking among themselves. Some seemed troubled by Velxoth's declaration. Others appeared satisfied that humanity would soon be reminded of its place. A few looked at Chen with something that might have been pity. Ambassador Chen, Tomvan said, his earlier amusement gone. The council cannot control the actions of individual empires. If the Zitharan fleet enters your declared exclusion zone, we will not intervene. However, I must warn you that any hostile action against Zitharan vessels will be considered an act of war. The Council will not support Earth in such a conflict. We understand, Chen said. Do you? An older voice spoke from one of the higher pods where the eldest and most respected species observed. Ambassador Creole of the Vorden Collective leaned forward, her ancient eyes fixed on the human. Commander Velxoth was not making an empty threat. The Zitharan fleet will include at least 200 warships. Your entire navy numbers what? 40 vessels? And those with inferior shielding and weapons technology? 37 vessels currently operational, Chen confirmed. Then you must see reason, Creole continued, her tone almost gentle. Withdraw your declaration. Apologize to the Zitharans. Perhaps offer them trade concessions. It is not too late to avoid catastrophe. Chen shook her head slowly. We will not withdraw the declaration. Then your people will die, Creole said flatly. Child species, I have witnessed the rise and fall of empires older than your civilization. I have seen what happens when pride outweighs wisdom. The Zitharans will not show mercy. We are not asking for mercy. What are you asking for? Creole demanded. You must want something. No species makes such declarations without purpose. For the first time since entering the chamber, Chen's expression shifted. Something moved behind her eyes. Something that made several of the nearer council members unconsciously draw back. We want to be left alone, she said quietly. That is all we have ever wanted. We spent 10,000 years fighting ourselves, destroying ourselves, nearly ending ourselves a dozen times over. We finally unified. We finally looked up at the stars and decided to join the galaxy peacefully. And in 80 years we have been invaded twice. Had our trade ship seized 7 times and watched 3 of our colonies demand protection payments from species who see us as easy targets because we are young. Her voice remained calm, but the words cut through the chamber like a blade. We are tired, Chen continued. We are tired of being tested. We are tired of being viewed as prey. We are tired of explaining that we simply want to develop in peace. So we are drawing a line, a clear line. And we are telling the galaxy as politely as we know how not to cross it. Or what? Velxoth's voice returned, his pod lighting up again. Apparently he had been listening. What will you do, human? Your weapons are primitive. Your shields are weak. Your ships are slow. What possible threat do you pose? Chen turned to face his pod one final time. We told you what we want, Commander. We told you where our boundaries are. We told you what would happen if you cross them. If you choose not to listen, that is your decision. She paused, and her next words dropped into the chamber like stones into still water. But do not say you were not warned. She bowed slightly to Speaker Tomvan, turned and walked toward the chamber exit. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. Pathetic, Velxoth muttered. 3 months, human. 3 months. And your exclusion zone will be revealed for the fantasy it is. And perhaps after we have passed through your space unopposed, your species will learn humility. Chen stopped at the door. She did not turn around. 3 months, she agreed. Then she left. The council chamber remained quiet for a long moment after she departed. Finally, Tomvan spoke. Are there any other matters to discuss? Wait! The voice came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Yulreen of the Corvan Dominion rose from his pod. The Torvans were an ancient species, peaceful by nature, known more for their philosophy than their military might. I must speak. Ambassador Yulreen? Tomvon sounded surprised. I have studied the humans, Yulreen said. It is my hobby, you might say. I have read their history, their literature, their philosophy. I have watched how they behave. And? Velxoth sounded bored. And I would urge caution, Yulreen said carefully. Humans are different. Different how? Krial asked. Yulreen seemed to struggle with his words. They are a species that spent 90% of their existence at war with themselves. They developed nuclear weapons and pointed them at their own cities. They created diseases that could kill billions and stored them in laboratories. They invented ways to poison their own atmosphere, boil their own oceans, crack their own planet's crust, and yet they never quite destroyed themselves. They came close dozens of times, but something always pulled them back from the edge. What is your point? Velxoth demanded. My point, Commander, is that humans are very good at one thing above all others, finding new and efficient ways to kill. They spent millennia perfecting the art, and now that they have finally stopped fighting each other, one must wonder what they have been doing with all that creative energy. Building colonies and fusion drives, Velxoth scoffed. I am not impressed. Perhaps you should be, Yulreen said quietly. When a human issues a warning, Commander, it is because they have already prepared for what comes after the warning is ignored. It is their nature. They do not bluff. Velxoth's laughter boomed through the chamber. Then let them prepare. I look forward to seeing what their preparations have accomplished. Perhaps they have built 40 ships instead of 37. Perhaps they have upgraded their shields by 5%. It will not matter. He cut his transmission again, and this time his pod went dark permanently. The council session ended shortly after. As the various ambassadors departed, small groups formed discussing the confrontation they had witnessed. Most agreed that humanity had overstepped. Some felt sympathy for what would likely happen to Earth's colonies. A few, like Yulreen, expressed private concerns that were largely dismissed. In 3 months, the Zitharan trade fleet would enter human space. 300 warships, the largest show of force the Empire had assembled in decades. It would be, Velxoth had announced, a demonstration that would echo through the galaxy for centuries. He was right about that, at least. Though not in the way he imagined. The Zitharan fleet assembled at the rally point 3 days ahead of schedule. Commander Velxoth wanted to make a statement, and he had succeeded. 300 warships hung in the void like a metal constellation, their running lights creating an artificial galaxy against the backdrop of real stars. Each vessel was massive, built for war, covered in armor plating thick enough to shrug off most weapons in the known galaxy. Each one carried enough firepower to level a small moon. Velxoth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominant Will, and surveyed his fleet through the main view screen. Pride swelled in his chest. This was power. This was the might that had conquered 47 systems. And he was about to use it to teach one arrogant species a lesson they would never forget. All ships report ready. Commander, his tactical officer announced. Excellent. Velxoth settled into his command chair, designed to accommodate his massive frame and 4 arms, broadcast on all frequencies. I want everyone to hear this. The communications officer worked quickly. Moments later, she nodded. All channels open, Commander. Every ship within 30 light-years will receive this. Velxoth leaned forward, his voice dropping into the formal register used for official declarations. This is High Commander Velxoth of the Zitharan Empire, addressing all vessels and settlements in this region of space. The fleet you see before you will now proceed along our traditional trade route, passing through the region that the human species has foolishly claimed as their exclusive territory. We do this to demonstrate a simple truth. Young species do not dictate terms to their elders. The Zitharan Empire goes where it wishes, when it wishes. Any attempt to interfere with our passage will be considered an act of war, and will be met with the full force of imperial might. This is not a threat. This is a statement of fact. He made a cutting gesture and the transmission ended. Set course, he ordered. Standard formation. Maximum scanner range. If the humans have any ships waiting for us, I want to know about them long before we arrive. The fleet moved as one, hundreds of ships executing the same turn, accelerating together toward the boundary of human space. The formation was beautiful in its precision, intimidating in its scope. Felxoth had chosen the traditional trade route specifically because it cut directly through the center of the human exclusion zone. He wanted there to be no doubt, no room for the humans to claim he had simply skirted the edge of their territory. He would pass through the heart of their claimed space, and he would do it unopposed. The journey to the boundary took 6 hours at standard fleet speed. Felxoth spent the time reviewing tactical reports and deployment plans. He did not expect the humans to actually oppose him, but if they did, he wanted the response to be overwhelming and immediate. A quick, decisive defeat would serve as a better lesson than simply passing through unopposed. "Commander," his sensor officer called out, "we are approaching the boundary coordinates specified in the human declaration. Any sign of human vessels?" "No, sir. Scanners show empty space ahead. No ships, no stations, no defense platforms, nothing." Felxoth felt a mixture of satisfaction and disappointment. Satisfaction that his assumptions had been correct. The humans had nothing with which to enforce their ridiculous claim. Disappointment that there would be no actual confrontation, no opportunity to demonstrate Zitharan superiority in combat. "Continue forward," he ordered. The fleet crossed the invisible line that marked the boundary of the human exclusion zone. Felxoth noted the exact moment in the ship's log. Let the historians record that the Zitharan Empire had treated human demands with the contempt they deserved. Space looked exactly the same on both sides of the boundary. The same distant stars, the same empty void. The human exclusion zone was just like any other region of space, devoid of anything special or dangerous. "Maintain course," Felxoth said. "Estimated time to cross the exclusion zone?" "At current speed, approximately 8 days, Commander," his navigation officer replied. "Very well. I want scanner sweeps every 10 minutes. If a single human ship approaches, I want to know about it immediately." The first 3 hours passed without incident. The fleet moved steadily deeper into the exclusion zone, maintaining perfect formation. Felxoth walked through the various sections of his flagship, inspecting the crew, ensuring readiness even though he expected no actual combat. In the command center of the dominant will, tactical displays showed the positions of all 300 ships, each one exactly where it should be. Felxoth allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This would be remembered. The day the Zitharan Empire proved that human warnings were empty threats. Then the sensor officer spoke up. "Commander, we have a contact. Single ship, small, approaching from galactic north." Felxoth moved quickly to the sensor station. "Analysis? It's definitely human design, sir. Fusion signature matches their standard drive systems. Mass suggests a research vessel, not military. It's not even shielded." "A research vessel?" Felxoth frowned. "Hail them." The communications officer worked for a moment. "They're responding, Commander." Putting them on screen. The main view screen shifted to show a small bridge, cramped compared to Zitharan standards. A human woman in a simple jumpsuit stood at its center. Behind her, Felxoth could see perhaps 4 other crew members working at various stations. "This is Captain Maria Torres of the research vessel Cassandra," the woman said. Her voice was tired, as if she had been through this conversation before. "You are currently in violation of Earth's exclusion zone. Turn back now. This is your final warning." Felxoth stared at the screen in disbelief. Then he began to laugh. Around the bridge, his crew joined in. "Your final warning?" he repeated. "Captain Torres, look around you. 300 warships, each one capable of destroying your vessel with a single shot. And you issue warnings?" Torres nodded slowly. "I see your ships, Commander. They're very impressive, but I'm still telling you to turn back. Or what?" Felxoth's amusement faded. "What will you do with your little research ship?" "Ram us." "I won't do anything," Torres said. "But if you continue forward, something else will. Please, Commander, turn back. Take the long route. Add 6 days to your journey. It's such a small price to pay." "The only price that will be paid today is the one for your arrogance," Felxoth growled. "You have 30 seconds to move your ship out of our path, or we will move it for you." Torres closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, Felxoth saw something unexpected in her expression. Not fear, not even anger, just sadness. "Then I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry we couldn't convince you. I'm sorry for what's going to happen. And I'm sorry that we tried so hard to avoid this and you forced us to do it anyway. 20 seconds, Velxoth said. My crew and I volunteer for this, Torres continued, speaking quickly now. We all signed up knowing what might happen. We drew straws to see who would get to be the last voice you heard, the last person who tried to warn you. I won. 10 seconds. Our families know. They're proud of us. We all left messages. Mine said, "Fire," Velxoth commanded. The weapons officer pressed a single button. A lance of superheated plasma crossed the distance between the dominant will and the Cassandra in less than a second. The research vessel didn't even try to dodge. It simply vanished in a bright flash of light and expanding gas. Silence filled the Zitharan bridge. Resume course, Velxoth said quietly. He felt no satisfaction from the kill. Something about Torres's words bothered him, though he could not say what. She had been so calm, so resigned, as if she had expected exactly what happened. As if it had all been part of some larger plan. He shook off the thought. The Cassandra had been nothing. A nuisance. Its destruction changed nothing about the fleet's mission. All ships maintain formation. Continue forward. The fleet obeyed. 300 warships now traveling through space where a single human ship had burned. 2 hours passed. Then 3. Velxoth remained on the bridge, though he sent his crew in shifts to rest. Something felt wrong, though he could not identify what. Space looked normal. Scans showed nothing unusual. The fleet's systems all operated at peak efficiency. And yet, Commander, the sensor officer said, her voice uncertain, I'm getting something, not a ship, not anything solid, just strange readings. Define strange. I don't know how to describe it, sir. The sensors are showing fluctuations in local space-time. Nothing dangerous, just unusual. As if space itself is rippling. Localized gravitic distortion, Velxoth suggested. Natural phenomena? Maybe? I've never seen anything quite like this before. It's almost like... She trailed off, working her instruments. Sir, it's moving with us. The readings are staying at a constant distance from the fleet, matching our speed exactly. Now Velxoth felt real concern. How is that possible? I don't know, sir. Are we in any danger? I don't think so. The readings are weak. Whatever it is, it's not interfering with our systems. It's just there. Velxoth made a decision. Increase scanner power. I want a full analysis of this phenomenon. And send a message to all ships. I want to know if anyone else is detecting the same thing. Responses came back within minutes. Every ship in the fleet reported similar readings. The phenomenon surrounded them. A strange rippling in space itself that seemed to follow their movement. Could it be a sensor malfunction? Velxoth asked. Across 300 ships, sir? With different sensor arrays and manufacturers? Highly unlikely. Then what is it? No one had an answer. The fleet continued forward. The strange readings persisted, never strengthening, never fading, just maintaining their constant presence around the fleet like a shadow that moved in perfect sync with its source. In the following hours, other problems began to emerge. Small things at first, minor glitches in navigation systems, brief power fluctuations, communication delays between ships that should have been instant. Nothing serious. Nothing that would normally cause concern. But added together, they created an atmosphere of unease that spread through the fleet. Velxoth ordered a full diagnostic of all systems. The results showed nothing wrong. Every ship's computer confirmed that all systems operated within normal parameters. The glitches continued anyway, as if something was affecting the fleet in ways the diagnostics couldn't detect. Commander, his communications officer said nervously. The Relentless, one of our destroyers on the outer perimeter. They've gone silent. Velxoth spun to face her. Silent? Define silent. No response to hails, sir. They're still on sensors, still in formation, but they're not responding to any communication attempts. Jamming? No indication of jamming, sir. The channel is clear. They're just not answering. A cold feeling settled in Velxoth's chest. Send a message to the ships nearest to the Relentless. Have them make visual contact. I want to know what's happening over there. He waited, watching the tactical display. The Relentless continued moving in formation, maintaining exact position relative to the rest of the fleet. Its engines were clearly working. Its systems appeared online. So why weren't they answering? Sir, the communications officer said, her voice shaking now. "The ships we sent to check on the Relentless, they've gone silent too." The cold feeling in Velxoth's chest spread. "How many?" "2 destroyers, sir. The Iron Fang and Stormbreaker." Both were moving toward the Relentless to establish visual contact. Both stopped responding about 30 seconds ago. Velxoth stared at the tactical display. 3 ships, all shown as green icons, all apparently functioning normally, but none of them responding. "Are they still moving?" "Yes, sir. Still maintaining formation perfectly." "Then who's piloting them?" No one answered. Velxoth made a decision he knew he might regret. "Halt the fleet. All stop now." The order rippled through the ships. 300 vessels began reducing speed, coming to a relative stop in empty space. 300 vessels except for 3. The Relentless, Iron Fang, and Stormbreaker continued forward, maintaining their original course and speed, pulling ahead of the rest of the fleet. "They're not responding to the stop order," the navigation officer said unnecessarily. Velxoth watched as the 3 ships grew smaller on the tactical display, moving away from the fleet. He waited for them to stop, to turn around, to do something that indicated living beings controlled them. They did nothing. They just kept moving forward, deeper into the exclusion zone, until the distance grew too great for visual contact. "Commander," the sensor officer whispered. "They just vanished." "What?" "The 3 ships. They're gone. Not destroyed. No debris, no explosion. They're just gone. Sensors show nothing where they should be." Velxoth felt his breathing quicken. Around the bridge, his crew stared at their instruments in shock. "Find them," he ordered. "Full sensor sweep. They have to be somewhere." They searched for an hour. Long-range scanners, short-range scanners, visual searches, everything they could think of. 3 destroyers, each carrying 200 crew members, had simply vanished from existence. And somewhere in his mind, Velxoth heard Captain Torres's voice again. "I'm sorry for what's going to happen." What had the humans done? What had he led his fleet into? Commander Velxoth had not slept in 36 hours. He stood on the bridge of the dominant will, staring at tactical displays that made less sense with each passing hour. Around him, his crew worked with quiet desperation, searching for answers that refused to appear. The fleet had lost 47 ships. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply gone as if they had never existed at all. One moment they appeared on sensors, maintaining perfect formation. The next moment, empty space, no explosions, no debris fields, no distress calls, nothing. The disappearances followed no pattern Velxoth could identify. Ships on the outer perimeter vanished. Ships in the center of the formation vanished. Large battle cruisers and small frigates disappeared with equal frequency. The only constant was that once a ship went silent, it was already too late. Within minutes, sometimes seconds, it would simply cease to exist. "Report," Velxoth demanded. His voice was hoarse from shouting orders and demanding explanations that no one could provide. "Fleet count stands at 253 vessels, Commander," his tactical officer said. She looked exhausted. Her scales had lost their normal sheen and her hands trembled as she worked her console. "We have lost 6 more ships in the past hour. 6 ships. More than 1,200 crew members gone. Damage reports?" "No damage to report, sir. Ships that have not disappeared are all showing green across the board. All systems nominal." That was perhaps the most terrifying part. The ships that remained were fine. Perfect even. No system failures, no battle damage, no signs of any external threat. Crews reported feeling uneasy, uncomfortable, as if they were being watched. But the ships themselves functioned flawlessly, right up until they vanished. What about the sensor readings? The spatial distortions we detected earlier? "Intensifying, Commander. The rippling effect is much stronger now. Some of our sensor technicians are reporting unusual feedback patterns. They describe it as if space itself is alive around us." Velxoth felt his mandibles tighten with stress. "That's not scientifically possible." "No, sir. It's not." He turned to his communications officer. "Any response from the humans?" "Negative, sir. We have been broadcasting on all frequencies, requesting dialogue, requesting explanation, requesting anything. No response. Either they're not listening or they're choosing not to answer. Or they're all dead too," Velxoth thought but did not say aloud. If whatever was destroying his fleet was also destroying human settlements in the region, there might be no one left to answer. But he didn't believe that. Deep in his gut, he knew the humans were out there, watching, waiting, letting this happen. "Commander," the navigation officer called out, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We have a problem with the jump coordinates." "What kind of problem?" "I've been calculating jump vectors to get us out of this region. Multiple routes, different destinations, everything I can think of. But every calculation, no matter where I set as the destination, shows us jumping deeper into the exclusion zone." Velixoth crossed the bridge in 3 strides. "Let me see." The navigation officer brought up his calculations on the main display. Velixoth studied them, his own training in spatial mechanics allowing him to follow the complex mathematics. His officer was right. Every jump vector, regardless of the intended destination, curved back toward the center of the human exclusion zone. As if space itself had warped, creating a gravitational well that pulled everything toward a single point. "This is impossible," Velixoth said. "This would require manipulating space-time on a massive scale. The energy requirements alone would exceed anything we've ever seen," the navigation officer finished. "Yes, sir. But the math doesn't lie. We cannot jump out of this region. We're trapped." The word hung in the air like a death sentence, trapped. "Then we travel the old way," Velixoth decided. "Plot a course using sublight engines. We'll return to the exclusion zone boundary the same way we came in." "Already tried that, sir. Ships that have attempted to reverse course have disappeared faster than those that maintained original heading. It's as if moving backward triggered something. Then we go forward." "Forward is toward the center of the zone, sir." Deeper into human space, Velixoth wanted to scream. Instead, he forced his voice to remain steady. "Are you telling me that we can only move in one direction? Toward the heart of Earth's territory?" "It appears that way, sir." A new voice spoke from the communication station. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission. Human frequencies." Every head on the bridge turned. Finally, after hours of silence, the humans were making contact. "Put it through," Velixoth ordered. The main view screen lit up, but it did not show a human face. Instead, simple text appeared, white letters on a black background. The translation field struggled for a moment, then rendered the message in Zitharan script. "You were warned." That was all. 3 words. Then the transmission ended. Velixoth stared at the screen long after it went dark. Around him, his crew sat in silence. "Respond," he finally said. "Tell them we acknowledge their message. Tell them we request immediate communication to negotiate terms for our departure." The communications officer worked quickly. "Message sent, sir." They waited. 5 minutes, 10:20. No response came. "Sir," the tactical officer said quietly, "we've lost 3 more ships while we waited." Velixoth's 4 hands clenched into fists. His breathing came in short, sharp bursts. He had led his fleet into this nightmare. He had ignored the warnings. He had destroyed the Cassandra and mocked Captain Torres's final words, and now his people were paying the price. "All ships," he said, activating the fleet-wide channel. "This is Commander Velixoth. We have entered a situation beyond our understanding. Whatever is affecting us appears to be some form of human defense system. We cannot jump to safety. We cannot reverse course without accelerating the rate of ship losses. Our only option is to continue forward and hope we can reach the far boundary of the exclusion zone before—" He didn't finish the sentence. "Before what? Before they all vanished? Before the entire fleet ceased to exist? Maintain tight formation," he continued. "All ships are to report any anomalies immediately. Navigation. Plot the fastest course through the remaining exclusion zone. Even if it takes us past Earth itself, we need to get out of this region." "Sir," his sensor officer said, her voice barely audible. "You should see this." Velixoth moved to her station. She brought up a display showing the space surrounding the fleet. At first he saw nothing unusual. Then she adjusted the frequency, shifting to a visual range that Zitharan eyes normally couldn't process. Velixoth's blood turned cold. The fleet wasn't traveling through empty space. They were surrounded by something, a structure of some kind, visible only in specific frequencies. It looked like a web, impossibly vast, stretching in all directions. Threads of it connected to each ship, thin lines of something that wasn't quite matter and wasn't quite energy. "What am I looking at?" he asked. "I don't know, sir. Whatever it is, it's been there all along. We just couldn't see it until I started scanning across the full spectrum. It's..." I think it's some kind of field. Or network. It surrounds us completely. And the ships that disappeared? She brought up recorded data from just before one of the vanishings. On the screen, Velxoth watched as the thread surrounding one of his destroyers suddenly brightened, pulsed with light, and then contracted. The ship seemed to fold in on itself, geometry twisting in ways that hurt to look at, and then it was simply gone. The threads remained for a moment, then faded as if satisfied with their work. "It's eating them," the sensor officer whispered. "The field, or whatever it is, it's consuming our ships." Velxoth felt true fear for the first time in his military career. He had fought in dozens of battles, faced death more times than he could count, but he had always understood his enemy. Ships could be fought, weapons could be countered, even overwhelming odds could be faced with courage and tactics. But this? How did you fight space itself? How did you counter an enemy you couldn't see, couldn't target, couldn't even comprehend? "Commander!" The communications officer's shout pulled him from his thoughts. "We're receiving another transmission." "From the humans?" "No, sir. From the Endless Conquest, Captain Thren's battlecruiser. They report seeing something." "Put them through." Captain Thren appeared on screen. He was older than Velxoth, a veteran of countless campaigns, and Velxoth had never seen him look frightened before. He looked frightened now. "Commander, I don't know how to describe this. My crew is reporting visual anomalies, things moving between the ships, shadows where there should be none. And sir, 3 of my crew members have disappeared from sealed sections of the ship." "Disappeared? Inside the ship?" "Yes, sir. We have video footage. One moment they're walking down a corridor. The next moment they're just gone. Like they walked through a door that doesn't exist and never came back." Before Velxoth could respond, another alert sounded. Multiple ships reporting similar incidents, the tactical officer said, her voice shaking. Crew members vanishing from inside their ships. Equipment disappearing. Some vessels report entire sections going dark, and when teams go to investigate, those sections are empty. Completely empty, as if everything that was there, including the investigating teams, simply ceased to exist. The situation was deteriorating faster than Velxoth could process. It was no longer just ships disappearing. Whatever had trapped them was now reaching inside the ships themselves, selectively removing people and objects like a predator picking meat from bones. "All ships, implement lockdown protocols," Velxoth ordered, knowing even as he spoke that it would accomplish nothing. "No one travels alone. Everyone stays in groups of at least 4. Seal all non-essential sections." The orders went out. They were followed. They made no difference. Over the next 6 hours, Velxoth watched his fleet die. Not quickly, not mercifully, but slowly. Methodically, like something was taking its time. Taking its time because it had all the time in the world and the fleet had nowhere to go. Ships continued to vanish. 2 at a time now, sometimes 3. The web surrounding them grew brighter with each disappearance, as if feeding on the destruction. Crew members disappeared from sealed compartments, from guarded rooms, from the very bridges of their ships. One moment present, the next moment gone, leaving behind only confused witnesses who could not explain what they had seen. Some ships reported that their disappeared crew members could be heard over internal communications, screaming, begging for help, saying they were trapped somewhere else, somewhere wrong, somewhere that hurt to exist in. Then the screams would stop, and the communications would go dead. Velxoth received a report that the Iron Storm, one of his largest battlecruisers, had been found drifting with no crew aboard. Every single member, over 800 souls, had vanished from a ship that showed no signs of intrusion or damage. The vessel was perfect, pristine, still operating on automatic systems. Just empty. When a salvage team boarded it to investigate, they disappeared too. After that, Velxoth stopped sending people to investigate. There was no point. Whatever was happening followed no rules he understood, and every attempt to study it just resulted in more deaths. "Fleet count?" he asked, his voice hollow. 112 ships, Commander," the tactical officer replied. She had been crying. Velxoth didn't blame her. Current rate of disappearance suggests complete fleet loss within 18 hours. 18 hours. Less than a day until 300 ships and over 500,000 crew members would be completely erased from existence. "Keep trying to contact the humans," Velxoth said. "Tell them." Tell them we surrender. Tell them we will pay any reparations. Tell them we acknowledge Earth's sovereignty over this region. Tell them whatever they want to hear. Just make them stop this. The communications officer worked frantically, sending message after message on every frequency available, begging, pleading, promising anything and everything if the humans would just respond. They sent 147 messages over the next 3 hours. Not one received a reply. The fleet continued forward because it had no choice. The web around them pulsed and fed and consumed, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Velksoth thought about Captain Torres again. Her sad eyes. Her apology. She had known. They had all known. The humans had tried to warn them, tried to save them, and the Zitherans had been too arrogant to listen. "Commander," his sensor officer said, "I'm detecting something ahead. I think it's a ship. Human configuration." Velksoth felt a desperate surge of hope. "Hail them immediately." "Working, sir. They're responding." A human face appeared on screen. Male, middle-aged, wearing a military uniform. He looked at Velksoth with an expression that might have been sympathy. "Commander Velksoth," the human said. "My name is Captain James Rivera. I'm here to witness." "Witness?" Velksoth didn't understand. "We need help. Your system, whatever it is, it's destroying my fleet."
Make it stop.
Rivera shook his head slowly. "I can't do that. No one can. Once you entered the exclusion zone without authorization, the defensive grid activated automatically. It cannot be deactivated while unauthorized vessels remain inside. Then authorize us." "Please, we'll leave immediately." "You can't leave," Rivera said gently. "The grid won't allow it." "I'm sorry, Commander. I truly am. But you were warned. Multiple times. You chose not to listen." "This is genocide," Velksoth roared. "No," Rivera corrected. "This is self-defense. You brought a military fleet into our territory after being explicitly told not to. You destroyed the Cassandra when it tried one last time to save you. Every death that occurs here is a direct result of your choices. We didn't know. We didn't understand what you had built. That's why we warned you," Rivera said. "That's why we established the exclusion zone. That's why we begged the Galactic Council to make sure all species understood that our boundaries were not negotiable. We tried everything we could to prevent this. You forced us to do it anyway." On Velksoth's tactical display, 3 more ships vanished. "What is it?" Velksoth asked, his voice breaking. "What did you do to this region of space?" Rivera hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. "During our last World War, before we unified, we developed weapons we prayed we would never have to use. One of them was a theory about weaponizing space-time itself, creating fields that could trap, contain, or eliminate anything that entered them. We never used it against ourselves. We shelved the research, locked it away. But when we started traveling the stars and realized how hostile the galaxy was, how many species would see us as prey?" He trailed off. "We built 50 of them, 50 autonomous defense platforms, positioned throughout the exclusion zone, each one maintaining a field that can detect, analyze, and eliminate unauthorized vessels. They're powered by quantum vacuum energy. They'll run for 10,000 years without maintenance." "You've turned your entire border into a death trap," Velksoth said. "We've turned our border into a warning that means something," Rivera corrected. "Every other species in the galaxy uses ships to defend their space. Ships that can be destroyed, fleets that can be defeated. We decided that if you wanted to invade human space, you wouldn't fight human ships. You'd fight space itself, and you can't win against space." Velksoth's tactical display showed 87 ships now. The number dropped to 84 as he watched. "You're monsters," he whispered. "Maybe," Rivera acknowledged. "But we're alive, and we're free, and no one will ever threaten that again." He paused. "I am truly sorry, Commander. For whatever it's worth, I hope you understand that we never wanted this. We just wanted to be left alone." The transmission ended. Velksoth stood alone on his bridge, watching his fleet disappear ship by ship, and knew that he would not live to see another day. The last thing he thought as the threads around the dominant will began to brighten and pulse was that humans had not lied. They had warned him, and he had not listened. The Galactic Council chamber was filled to capacity for the first time in 3 centuries. Every species, every faction, every political entity with any claim to power had sent representatives. They sat in their pods in complete silence, waiting for the session to begin. 2 weeks had passed since the Zytheran fleet entered the human exclusion zone. 2 weeks since 300 warships and over 500,000 souls had vanished without a trace. The silence in the chamber was not respectful. It was terrified. Speaker Tom Van rose from his pod, his 3-part beak trembling slightly as he spoke. This emergency session of the Galactic Council is now convened. The matter before us is the complete disappearance of the Zytheran Imperial Trade Fleet, last known position within the territorial region claimed by the human species of Earth. He paused, as if gathering courage for what came next. Ambassador Chen of Earth has agreed to address the Council. I remind all present that this is a diplomatic inquiry, not a trial. All species are requested to maintain decorum and allow the ambassador to speak without interruption. Sarah Chen entered the chamber through the main doors. Walking alone across the vast floor to the center position, she looked exactly as she had 3 months earlier, wearing the same simple gray suit, her expression calm and unreadable. She did not look like someone who had just committed what might be the greatest mass killing in galactic history. Ambassador Chen, Tom Van said carefully, the Council requests information regarding the fate of the Zytheran fleet. Can you provide us with answers? Yes, Chen said simply. The single word sent a ripple of reaction through the chamber. She was not denying involvement. She was not claiming ignorance. Just yes, then please, Tom Van said. Tell us what happened. Chen looked around the chamber, making eye contact with various representatives. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly to every pod. The Zytheran fleet entered our exclusion zone despite multiple warnings. They were informed of the boundaries. They were told not to cross. They chose to cross anyway. Our automated defense systems responded as designed. The fleet was eliminated, the chamber erupted. Shouts in dozens of languages translated into a cacophony of outrage, fear, and disbelief. Tom Van had to call for order 3 times before the noise subsided enough for him to continue. You admit responsibility? He asked. I confirm that our defense systems functioned as intended, Chen replied. 500,000 people. The shout came from the Zytheran pod where Acting Commander Vreshkal stood, his scales dark with grief and rage. 500,000 of my people wiped out. And you stand there calmly admitting it? Chen turned to face him. Yes, I'm sorry for your loss, Commander, truly. But your people were warned. Multiple times. At the Council session 3 months ago, at the boundary of our exclusion zone, and even when a single research vessel attempted one final warning, your High Commander chose to ignore every warning, chose to destroy the Cassandra and its crew, and chose to continue forward. The consequences of those choices were his responsibility. You murdered them, Vreshkal roared. We defended our territory, Chen corrected, her voice still calm. The difference is significant. This council must condemn these actions. Vreshkal looked around the chamber seeking support. We cannot allow one species to claim the right to destroy entire fleets without consequence. Today it is Zytherans. Tomorrow it could be any of you. He had a point, and many council members were nodding. But others looked uncertain. Afraid even, Ambassador Creole of the Vorden Collective spoke up, her ancient voice cutting through the tension. Ambassador Chen, I have a question that I believe speaks to the heart of this matter. You say your defense systems responded as designed. What exactly are these defense systems? How did they eliminate 300 warships so completely that we have found no debris, no survivors, no trace whatsoever? Chen was quiet for a moment, as if considering how much to reveal. If we explain our defensive capabilities, she finally said, we will be sharing classified military information with the entire galaxy. That is not something we do lightly. However, given the circumstances, Earth's government has authorized me to provide a limited disclosure. She pressed something on a device she carried, and holographic displays appeared above her, visible to the entire chamber. They showed complex equations, 3-dimensional models of spatial geometries, and schematics that looked more like abstract art than technology. During our final global conflict, before Earth unified, multiple nations developed theoretical weapons based on manipulating space-time itself. The research was dangerous, ethically questionable, and ultimately shelved. When we began exploring the galaxy and realized the level of aggression we would face, we revisited that research. We spent 60 years perfecting it, 20 years building the actual platforms. The result is what we call the exclusion net. She manipulated the display, showing a three-dimensional map of the exclusion zone. 50 points of light appeared, distributed throughout the region. 50 autonomous platforms, each one generating a field that extends throughout the exclusion zone. The fields overlap, creating a net of warped spacetime. When unauthorized vessels enter the zone, the net activates. And does what? Krial pressed. It isolates them, Chen said. The ships don't explode. They don't disintegrate. They're folded into pocket dimensions, separate quantum spaces that exist alongside our own universe but cannot interact with it. From the perspective of normal space, they simply cease to exist. Horror spread through the chamber like a wave. Several representatives made religious gestures specific to their species. Others simply stared in shock. You're saying, Tom Van said slowly, that the Zithran fleet still exists? Trapped in some other dimension? In a manner of speaking, Chen confirmed. Though exists might be too generous a term. The pocket dimensions are not designed to sustain life. They have no conventional physics, no time as we understand it. Anything placed inside them is effectively frozen, preserved in a state that is neither alive nor dead. Quantum stasis, that's obscene, someone whispered. That's effective, Chen countered. Our exclusion zone has one purpose: to ensure that anyone who violates our boundaries cannot threaten Earth, cannot return to tell others where our defenses are weak, and cannot encourage others to test us. The exclusion net accomplishes all three objectives. Vreshkal spoke again, his voice shaking with fury. You have condemned my people to eternal torture, trapped forever in nightmare spaces. This is worse than death. They feel nothing, Chen said, though her expression softened slightly. Time does not pass for them. They are not suffering because they are not experiencing anything at all. It is closer to suspended animation than torture. Can they be retrieved? Krial asked. Theoretically, yes. If the platforms were deactivated and the fields collapsed, anything trapped inside would return to normal space. However, doing so would leave Earth defenseless, and we have no intention of deactivating our defenses. So they are lost forever, Vreshkal said. They were lost the moment Commander Velixoth gave the order to enter our territory. Chen replied. We gave you fair warning, Commander. We could not have been more clear. Your High Commander gambled that we were bluffing, that a young species could not possibly have developed weapons capable of stopping a Zithran fleet. He was wrong. That is tragedy, certainly. But it is not murder. The council chamber fell silent again. Representatives looked at each other, and in those looks an understanding passed between them. Fear, respect, a fundamental recalculation of how they viewed humanity. Tom Von cleared his throat. Ambassador Chen, the council must now deliberate on this matter. However, I have one final question before you depart. You have revealed the existence of these weapons. You have shown us to some degree how they function. Are you not concerned that other species will now develop countermeasures or similar weapons of their own? Chen smiled slightly, and for the first time there was something cold in her expression. Let them try, she said. The physics involved require an understanding of quantum mechanics and space-time manipulation that we spent centuries developing. Even with the information I have shared today, it would take most species hundreds of years to replicate our work. And by then, our defenses will have evolved. The exclusion net is first-generation technology, Speaker. We are already working on second- and third-generation systems. She let that sink in for a moment. But more importantly, we hope that no one will try. We hope that today's revelation will serve as a permanent warning to the galaxy. Earth has boundaries. Those boundaries are absolute. Cross them and you will not be fought. You will simply cease to exist in any meaningful way. We don't say this as a threat. We say it as a fact. Test us and you will share the Zithran fleet's fate. And if the Council decides that your actions constitute a war crime, Vreshkal demanded, if we vote to sanction Earth, to demand you dismantle these weapons, Chen's smile faded. Then we will politely decline and withdraw from the Galactic Council. We joined this organization hoping for peaceful coexistence and mutual respect. If the Council cannot provide that, if our desire for simple sovereignty is viewed as aggression, then we have no place here. We will return to Sol System, seal our borders completely, and have no further contact with galactic civilization. You would isolate yourselves? Krial asked. Cut off all trade, all cultural exchange, all diplomatic relations? If necessary, yes, Chen said. We survived 10,000 years alone on one planet. We can survive another 10,000 alone in one star system. It would be a loss, certainly, but it would be preferable to being constantly tested, constantly threatened, constantly told that our boundaries do not matter because we are young. She looked around the chamber one final time. We came to the stars hoping to find friends, she said quietly. We found predators, so we learned to be something that predators avoid. That is not the story we wanted to write, but it is the story you forced us to write. We gave you every opportunity to respect our borders. The Zitharan Empire chose differently. The consequences of that choice are not our responsibility. With that, she bowed slightly to Speaker Tom Van and walked toward the exit. Wait, a voice called out. Ambassador Yul Reen of the Chorvan Dominion floated his pod down to the chamber floor, something rarely done during official sessions. Ambassador Chen, may I speak with you? Privately? Chen stopped and turned. Of course, Ambassador. They moved to a side chamber while the main council erupted in debate. Once they were alone, Yul Reen's usual calm demeanor cracked slightly. I tried to warn them, he said. 3 months ago I told Velxoth that humans do not bluff. I told him you were dangerous. He did not listen. I know, Chen said. We monitored the council session. We appreciated your attempt to prevent this. Appreciated enough to tell me the truth? Yul Reen asked. What you told the council today about pocket dimensions and quantum stasis, that was a simplification, was it not? There is something more to your exclusion net. Chen studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yes, something more. Will you tell me? Why do you want to know? Because I study humans, Yul Reen said. It is my life's work to understand your species. And what I have learned is that humans are very good at one thing: escalation. You never build just one weapon. You build layers, backup plans, systems within systems. The exclusion net is terrifying, yes, but I do not believe it is the only thing protecting your borders. Chen's expression revealed nothing, but her silence confirmed his suspicion. I will tell you this, she finally said. The platforms I described, the ones that fold ships into pocket dimensions, those are defensive systems. They respond to intrusions, but we also have offensive capabilities. Weapons that can reach out across any distance and target anyone who threatens us. We have never used them. We hope we never have to, but they exist. Hidden somewhere in your exclusion zone? Hidden everywhere in the galaxy, Chen corrected. We have had 80 years to prepare, Ambassador Yul Reen. 80 years to plant seeds, establish contingencies, and ensure that Earth's survival does not depend solely on defending one region of space. We are cautious by nature. Some would say paranoid. Perhaps they are right. But paranoia has kept us alive. Yul Reen felt a chill run through him. You are saying that Earth could strike back at any species, anywhere, at any time? We are saying that anyone who harms Earth would come to regret it, Chen replied. We do not advertise this capability because we do not want to use it. But if pushed, if truly threatened, we will do whatever is necessary to ensure our survival. That is the real lesson of the exclusion net, Ambassador. Not that we can defend our borders, but that we have thought about every possible threat, every possible scenario, and we have prepared responses for all of them. She moved toward the door, then paused. Thank you for trying to warn them, she said. I genuinely mean that. The galaxy needs voices like yours, voices that advocate for caution and understanding. I hope that in time more species will listen to such voices. Until then, we will maintain our borders and hope that the Zitharan fleet's fate serves as warning enough. She left, leaving Ambassador Yul Reen alone with the terrifying understanding of what humanity had become. Not conquerors, not explorers seeking to expand their territory, but something potentially more dangerous. A species so committed to their own survival that they had turned themselves into something the galaxy would learn to avoid at all costs. In the main chamber, the debate raged on, but Yul Reen already knew how it would end. The council would recognize Earth's exclusion zone. They would condemn the loss of life. They would file formal protests and demand future transparency. And then they would do absolutely nothing. because no one wanted to find out what other weapons humanity had prepared. The Zitharan Empire had tested Earth's resolve and paid the ultimate price. No one else would make the same mistake. 6 months after the Zitharan fleet disappeared, the galaxy had changed in ways both obvious and subtle. The most visible change was the collapse of the Zitharan Empire itself. Without their military leadership, without the fear that had held their conquered territories together, the empire simply fell apart. 47 systems that had been held under Zitharan control for generations rose up simultaneously. Some declared independence. Others formed new alliances with neighboring species. A few descended into civil war as different factions competed for power. The Galactic Council sent peacekeeping forces to the worst conflict zones, but they let most of the transitions occur naturally. No one had the appetite for forced reunification, especially when the alternative was allowing former slaves to determine their own fate. Acting Commander Vreshikal tried to hold the Empire together for 3 weeks before accepting reality. He made one final transmission to the Galactic Council, broadcast across all frequencies so every species could hear. "The Zitharan Empire is no more," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "We built our power on military might and the assumption that no one could challenge us. Earth proved that assumption wrong. Our fleet, our pride, our high commander all gone in an instant, because we believed ourselves invincible. Let our fall be a lesson to any species that thinks might makes right. The galaxy has changed. The old rules no longer apply." He resigned his command the next day and retired to a colony world where he lived quietly, never speaking publicly about the fleet again. In the halls of the Galactic Council, the change was more subtle but equally profound. Species that had once postured and threatened each other now chose their words more carefully. Aggressive expansion plans were quietly shelved. Trade disputes that might have escalated to military threats were resolved through actual diplomacy. Earth's exclusion zone had become the elephant in every room. No one wanted to discuss it directly, but it influenced every decision, every negotiation, every strategic calculation. A single question hung over every interaction. If humans could do that to the Zitharans, what could they do to us? Ambassador Chen noticed the change during council sessions. Species that had barely acknowledged her before now treated her with careful respect. Some sought her advice on various matters, hoping to build positive relationships with Earth. Others simply avoided her entirely, afraid that even diplomatic disagreements might somehow trigger human retaliation. She found it exhausting. "They fear us now," she told her assistant. One evening after a particularly tense council session, "That was never the goal. We just wanted to be left alone." But being left alone required being feared, her assistant pointed out. There was no middle ground. "The galaxy doesn't respect boundaries unless those boundaries have teeth." Chen sighed. "I know. Doesn't mean I have to like it." The physical boundary of the exclusion zone had become something of a pilgrimage site, though no one dared enter it. Ships would travel to the edge, close enough to detect the faint spatial distortions that marked where the exclusion net waited, and then they would stop. Some captains held memorial services for the lost Zitharan crew. Others simply wanted to see the place where 300 warships had vanished. A human memorial station had been established at one of the entry points, a small structure that served as both warning and monument. It listed the names of every crew member aboard the Cassandra, the research vessel that had tried one last time to warn the Zitharan fleet. Below those names, a simple inscription read, "They volunteered to be the last warning. They hoped you would listen." Beneath that, a longer message. "This exclusion zone exists not because Earth seeks conflict, but because Earth seeks peace. We ask only that other species respect our boundaries, as we respect theirs." The ships that entered this region did so against multiple warnings. Their fate was tragic but preventable. We hope that no other species will force us to demonstrate our defensive capabilities again. We prefer to be your partners, not your adversaries. The choice, as always, is yours. Below the plaque, embedded in the station structure, was a physical marker that aligned perfectly with where the exclusion net began. Cross this line without authorization, and you will share the Zitharan fleet's fate. The message was clear, permanent, and absolute. Ships from every corner of the galaxy came to read it. Then they turned around and left. The change in the galaxy's attitude toward humanity manifested in unexpected ways. Trade agreements that had been stalled for years suddenly moved forward. Research partnerships were proposed. Cultural exchange programs expanded. No one said it explicitly, but the calculation was obvious. Better to be Earth's friend than to risk being Earth's enemy. Human colonies beyond the exclusion zone reported a dramatic decrease in harassment. Pirates who had once viewed human merchant ships as easy targets now avoided them entirely. Aggressive species that had demanded tribute from human settlements suddenly discovered that those demands were no longer necessary. The few who tested these waters disappeared mysteriously, their ships found drifting with all crew missing and no signs of struggle. Earth never claimed responsibility for these incidents. They never had to. Ambassador Yulreen published a paper 6 months after the Zitharan fleet's disappearance. Titled The Quiet Ones: Understanding Humanity's Approach to Galactic Politics, it became required reading in diplomatic schools across the galaxy. The core thesis was simple. Humans do not make idle threats, do not posture for political gain, and do not bluff. When they establish a boundary, that boundary is absolute. When they issue a warning, that warning should be heeded without question. The paper included a detailed analysis of human history, showing pattern after pattern of humanity's approach to conflict. Give them space and they will be peaceful neighbors. Push them into a corner, and they will develop weapons that fundamentally change the nature of warfare itself. Nuclear weapons, biological agents, artificial intelligence, quantum manipulation. Humans, Yulreen wrote, are not the most aggressive species in the galaxy. They are not the most militaristic. They are not even the most violent. But they are the most creative when it comes to survival. They approach every threat with the assumption that they might lose, and they prepare accordingly. This makes them far more dangerous than species who rely purely on strength or numbers. The paper's conclusion was stark. The galaxy has two choices. We can accept that Earth's boundaries are real and respect them, living in peace with a species that wants only to be left alone. Or we can test those boundaries and learn what other weapons humanity has prepared. The Zitharan Empire chose the second option. Their fate should guide our choice. In the Officers' Academy on Chorvan Prime, Yulreen's paper was assigned to every cadet alongside a case study of the Zitharan fleet's disappearance. The lessons were simple and direct. Respect other species' boundaries, take their warnings seriously, and never assume that superior numbers or technology guarantee victory. One particular teaching scenario became standard across multiple species military academies. Cadets were presented with a simulation. Your fleet encounters a species that has established a defensive boundary around their territory. They warn you not to cross. Your orders are to cross anyway because the territory contains strategic resources your government needs. What do? The correct answer, cadets learned, was to disobey orders and refuse to cross. Victory against an enemy's ships was possible. Victory against weaponized space itself was not. And more importantly, following orders that led to your fleet's complete destruction served no one. The simulation was called the Zitharan scenario. In human space, the changes were equally significant, though less visible to outside observers. The 50 platforms that generated the exclusion net received regular maintenance and upgrades. Their quantum cores were refreshed. Their programming was refined. New countermeasures were developed to address theoretical vulnerabilities, but the platforms themselves remained largely unchanged. Because they worked perfectly as designed, the real development was happening elsewhere. Ambassador Chen had told Yulreen the truth when she said Earth had offensive capabilities hidden throughout the galaxy. What she had not told him was the scale of that program. In addition to the exclusion net, Earth had deployed 300 autonomous weapons platforms in deep space, scattered across trade routes near major population centers, and in strategic locations where they could respond to any threat against Earth or its colonies. Each platform was equipped with the same space-time manipulation technology that powered the exclusion net, but designed for precision strikes rather than area defense. They had never been used. Most of the galaxy did not know they existed. Earth preferred it that way. The best weapon, the head of Earth's Strategic Defense Command often said, is the one you never have to use. The exclusion net has done its job perfectly. It eliminated one threat and prevented 1,000 others just by existing. That is efficient defense. Earth's government debated quietly and constantly whether they had gone too far. 500,000 deaths weighed heavily on many politicians and military leaders. Some argued that there should have been a way to disable the fleet without destroying it completely. Others pointed out that any warning more gentle than complete annihilation would have been tested again and again until someone got through. The debates never led anywhere concrete. The exclusion net remained active. The boundary remained absolute, and the galaxy learned to adjust. 3 years after the incident, a young Zitharan officer named Krenal was assigned to patrol the border regions that had once been part of the Empire. His ship, a small corvette that served the new Zitharan Federation, was part of the peacekeeping force that tried to maintain order in the fractured territories. One day, his patrol route brought him near the edge of Earth's exclusion zone. He had been too young to serve in High Commander Velksoth's fleet, but he had lost family members in the disaster. An uncle, 2 cousins, friends from his childhood who had proudly joined the military and marched off to teach the humans respect. They never came back. Krenal ordered his ship to hold position at what he judged to be a safe distance from the exclusion zone boundary, close enough to see the memorial station, far enough to avoid activating any defensive systems. His second officer, an older veteran who had served under the Empire, approached him on the bridge. "Paying respects, sir?" "Something like that," Krenal replied, studying the memorial station on his screen. "Did you know anyone who was part of the fleet?" "Many," the veteran said quietly. "Good soldiers, brave warriors. They followed orders, as we all would have. They did not deserve what happened to them." "No," Krenal agreed. "They didn't." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the distant station marking the boundary of human space. Finally, the young officer spoke again. "Why do you think they did it? The humans, I mean. Why create something so terrible?" The veteran considered the question. "I have thought about this many times, sir. I have read the reports, studied their history, tried to understand, and I think the answer is simple. They were afraid." "Afraid? Of us?" "Afraid of everyone," the veteran corrected. "Earth is one planet, one species. We are thousands of species, millions of worlds, billions of ships. From their perspective, they were surrounded by potential threats. They could not compete with numbers. They could not match the military might of established empires. So they built something that made numbers and might irrelevant." Krenal nodded slowly. "They built a weapon so terrible that no one would dare attack them." "Not just that," the veteran said. "They built a warning system that could not be ignored. Commander Velksoth thought they were bluffing because he could not imagine a species actually creating something like the exclusion net. But humans did not bluff. They told us exactly what would happen if we crossed their boundary, and when we did, they followed through." "Should we hate them for it?" Krenal asked. The veteran thought for a long time before answering. "I do not know, sir. Part of me does hate them. They killed my friends, destroyed our empire, changed our entire civilization. But another part of me understands that we were warned, multiple times, and we ignored those warnings because we were arrogant." He gestured toward the memorial station. "The humans put up that monument not to celebrate their victory, but to honor their own dead. The crew of the Cassandra, who tried one last time to save our fleet. That tells me something about who they are. They did not want this to happen. They tried to prevent it. We forced their hand." Krenal continued staring at the screen. "If you were in command that day, would you have given different orders?" "I would like to think so," the veteran said. "I would like to believe that I would have listened to Captain Torres, turned the fleet around and accepted the longer route. But I served under the old empire, sir. I was trained to view compromise as weakness. If I had been in Commander Velksoth's position, I might have made the same choice." He paused. "That is what haunts me. Not that our people died, but that I might have led them to the same fate." A console beeped, indicating an incoming transmission. The communications officer looked up. "Sir, we're being hailed. Human vessel, approaching from inside the exclusion zone." Krenal felt his hearts beat faster. On screen, the view screen changed to show a human woman in a military uniform. She looked young, perhaps the same age as Krenal himself. This is Lieutenant Sarah Kim of the Earth Defense Force vessel Sentinel. You are currently positioned near the boundary of Earth's exclusion zone. Is there a problem we can help you with? Her tone was polite, professional, showing no hostility. Krenal gathered himself. No problem, Lieutenant. My name is Officer Krenal of the Zitharan Federation corvette New Dawn. We are on routine patrol. I lost family members in the incident 3 years ago. I wanted to see the memorial. Lieutenant Kim's expression softened. I understand. I'm sorry for your loss, Officer Krenal. You are welcome to remain at your current position as long as you need. The memorial is there for anyone who wishes to pay respects. Thank you. Krenal hesitated, then asked the question that had been weighing on him. Lieutenant, do you know anyone who served on the Cassandra? Kim nodded. Captain Torres was my instructor at the academy. She taught navigation and first contact protocols. She volunteered for the mission knowing she would not survive it. She believed that if your fleet saw humans willing to sacrifice themselves to deliver one final warning, it might make Commander Velksoth reconsider. But it didn't, Krenal said. No, it didn't. Kim's expression was sad. Captain Torres knew it was unlikely to work, but she felt she had to try. That was the kind of person she was. Your people honor her memory? Very much so. There is a statue of her at Earth's orbital station, and every cadet studies her final transmission. We teach that good defenders do not want to kill. They want to warn. Captain Torres embodied that principle. Krenal looked at his veteran officer, then back at the screen. Lieutenant Kim, may I ask you a question? As one junior officer to another? Of course. Do you think what happened was justified? Kim took a long breath. That is a complicated question, Officer Krenal. Personally, I think it was a tragedy that should never have happened. 500,000 deaths is not something to celebrate, but I also understand why our government created the exclusion net. We studied galactic history. We saw what happens to young species that cannot defend themselves. They get conquered, enslaved, or destroyed. Earth chose a fourth option. Make ourselves so dangerous that no one would dare try. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. What happened to your fleet was the price of that deterrence. It was a terrible price, but it has prevented hundreds of other conflicts. How many wars have not started because species now think twice before threatening others? How many lives have been saved because aggressive empires realize that overwhelming force is no longer enough to guarantee victory? So you think the ends justified the means? Krenal asked. I think the means were terrible, and I wish there had been another way. But I also think that if we had not demonstrated the reality of our defenses, someone else would have tested us. And then someone else after that. The exclusion net has only one setting: absolute. It cannot bluff. It cannot make threats. It simply executes its programming. Your fleet learned that lesson so that no one else would have to. Krenal absorbed this. Your honesty is appreciated, Lieutenant. We try to be honest, officer, especially with those who have been affected by our actions. Is there anything else we can help you with? No, thank you. We will leave the area shortly. Kim nodded. Safe travels, Officer Krenal. And again, I am sorry for your loss. The transmission ended. Krenal sat in his command chair, processing the conversation. She seemed decent, the veteran officer observed, for someone representing the species that destroyed our empire. Yes, Krenal agreed. That is what troubles me. It would be easier if they were monsters. But they are not. They are just people trying to survive in a galaxy that saw them as weak. He stood and addressed his crew. Set course for our next patrol point. We have remained here long enough. As the New Dawn turned away from the exclusion zone, Krenal took one last look at the memorial station. The message on that plaque would remain there for centuries. A permanent reminder of the day the galaxy learned that humanity's warnings were not suggestions. Stay out. 2 words that had changed everything. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out with different species, different officers, different perspectives, but the underlying reality was the same. Earth had drawn a line, enforced it with absolute finality, and changed the fundamental calculus of galactic politics. In the Galactic Council chambers, a new resolution was being debated, proposed by a coalition of smaller species who had previously been targets of aggression. It called for the establishment of universal standards for territorial boundaries. The core principle was simple. Every species had the right to establish defensive zones around their home systems, and those zones would be recognized by the Council as sovereign territory. The resolution was called the Earth Accord, though Ambassador Chen had not asked for it and initially opposed the name. "We do not want to be the face of this movement," she told Speaker Tom Van during a private meeting. "We want to be one species among many, all of whom have the right to defend themselves." "I understand your concern," Tom Van replied. "But you must also understand the symbolic importance. The Earth Accord represents a fundamental shift in how the galaxy operates. For thousands of years, might has made right. Strong species expanded, weak species retreated or died. Your actions proved that there is another way. Technology and determination can counter raw power. Small species can defend themselves if they are willing to pay the price." "The price was 500,000 lives," Chen said quietly. "Yes. And because of that price, millions of others may be saved. The aggressive empires that once preyed on smaller species are now reconsidering their strategies. Trade is replacing conquest. Diplomacy is replacing threats. These are positive changes, Ambassador, even if they came from tragedy." The Earth Accord passed with overwhelming support. Only 3 species voted against it, all of them former empires that had built their power on expansion and conquest. Their objections were noted and ignored. Under the new framework, dozens of species established their own exclusion zones, though none with defenses as absolute as Earth's. Most relied on conventional military fleets and early warning systems, but the principle was the same. Here is our boundary, respect it or face consequences. Wars did not end. Species still had disputes, still competed for resources, still occasionally came into conflict, but the nature of those conflicts changed. Boundaries were recognized. Warnings were heeded. The automatic assumption that military superiority meant victory was no longer automatic. 5 years after the Zytheran fleet disappeared, Ambassador Chen gave her final address to the Galactic Council before retiring from diplomatic service. "When I first stood in this chamber and declared Earth's exclusion zone, many of you laughed," she began. "You saw us as young, naive, arrogant. You could not imagine that a species so new to the stars could enforce such a claim. The Zytheran Empire decided to test that assumption, and the results changed galactic history." She paused, looking around the chamber at the representatives who had, over the years, gone from dismissing her to fearing her to finally, grudgingly, respecting her. "I will not apologize for what happened. My government acted to defend our people and we succeeded. But I will say this, we never wanted to be feared. We wanted to be left alone. We wanted the right to develop at our own pace, to make our own mistakes, to chart our own future without interference from species that saw us as easy prey. The exclusion net gave us that right. But it gave us something we never asked for, a reputation as the galaxy's untouchable species. People whisper about us. They speculate about what other weapons we have hidden. They treat us with careful respect born from fear rather than friendship." She shook her head slowly. "That is not the relationship we wanted with the galaxy, but it is the relationship you forced upon us. When we asked politely to be left alone, we were ignored. When we demonstrated the consequences of violating our boundaries, we were finally heard. That says something about galactic culture that I hope future generations will work to change. The Earth Accord is a step in the right direction. Recognizing every species' right to defend their home systems creates a foundation for mutual respect. But respect based on fear is fragile. Real respect comes from understanding, from cultural exchange, from seeing each other as partners rather than threats." She smiled slightly. "My successor, Ambassador David Martinez, will work toward that goal. He is younger than me, less cynical, more optimistic about the galaxy's future. I hope he is right to be optimistic. I hope that future generations will remember the Zytheran fleet not as a symbol of human power, but as the last time any species needed to learn this lesson the hard way." The chamber gave her a standing ovation, something rarely done for departing ambassadors. Chen bowed slightly and left the chamber for the final time. She returned to Earth, to a quiet life in the mountains where she wrote her memoirs and occasionally gave lectures to diplomatic students. She never returned to space, never visited the exclusion zone, never saw the memorial station that bore the names of the Cassandra's crew. But she thought about them often. About Captain Torres and her calm acceptance of fate. About Commander Veluxoth and his fatal arrogance. About all the people who died because warnings were not heeded. In her memoirs, published 3 years after her retirement, she wrote, "History will debate whether Earth's actions were justified. Some will say we went too far, that we could have found another way. Others will say we did not go far enough, that we should have made an example even more dramatic. I believe both views are wrong. We did exactly what we said we would do. We established a boundary, warned those who would cross it, and enforced that boundary when our warnings were ignored. That is not cruelty. That is consistency. And in a galaxy where might often makes right, sometimes consistency is the most powerful weapon of all." 10 years after the incident, the memorial station at the edge of the exclusion zone received an unexpected addition. The Zitharan Federation, working with several other species who had lost people to various conflicts, erected a second monument next to the Earth one. This monument listed every name from the Zitharan fleet, 500,000 names engraved on plates of metal that would last for millennia. Below the names, a simple inscription. They followed orders. They believed in their cause. They ignored warnings and paid the ultimate price. Let their sacrifice teach us that pride and power are not substitutes for wisdom. Let their memory remind us that every action has consequences. Let their names stand as a warning to future generations. Listen when others establish boundaries. Respect when others say no. And understand that your strength does not give you the right to ignore the sovereignty of others. On the day the monument was unveiled, ships from 30 different species gathered at the boundary. No one entered the exclusion zone. They simply came to witness, to remember, and to acknowledge the lesson that had been taught. A human delegation attended, led by Ambassador Martinez. He gave a brief speech, his voice carrying across the assembled ships via broadcast. "We gather here not to celebrate victory or mourn defeat, but to acknowledge a moment in history when the galaxy changed," he said. "The names on this monument represent people who died because boundaries were not respected. Their deaths were preventable. Their sacrifice was unnecessary, but their legacy is that no future generation should have to learn this lesson again." He paused, then continued. "Earth extends its condolences to the Zitharan Federation and to all species who lost loved ones in this tragedy. We hope that in time, the galaxy will evolve beyond the need for such demonstrations. We hope that future generations will respect boundaries not because of fear, but because it is the right thing to do. Until that day comes, the exclusion net remains active. The boundary remains absolute, and the warning remains clear." He gestured toward both monuments. "Let these stand together, human and Zitharan, warning and memorial, a reminder of what happens when pride meets consequence, and a hope that such reminders will eventually become unnecessary." The ceremony ended. The ships dispersed. The monuments remained, twin sentinels marking the place where 300 warships had entered and never returned. Years passed, then decades. The galaxy continued turning. Species rose and fell, conflicts erupted and resolved. But Earth's exclusion zone remained constant, unchanging, absolute. Ships passed near it regularly, following trade routes that had been adjusted to go around the boundary. Captains pointed it out to new crew members, telling the story of the Zitharan fleet, making sure everyone understood why the detour was necessary. "See that region?" they would say, gesturing toward the zone on navigation displays. "That's human space. Stay out, the boundary is real. The warnings are not suggestions. And if you think you're the one who will be the exception, remember that the Zitharan Empire thought the same thing." In Earth's military academies, the incident became required study for all officers, not as a celebration of defensive capabilities, but as a cautionary tale about the costs of deterrence. Students learned about the exclusion net's development, its deployment, and its terrible effectiveness. They also learned about the price: 500,000 lives, the collapse of an empire, and the burden of being forever known as the species that turned space itself into a weapon. The final exam question was always the same. Given the choice to do it over, knowing what you know now, would you still authorize the exclusion net's deployment? There was no correct answer. The question was designed to make students think about the weight of command decisions, about the difference between capability and action, about the responsibility that came with power. Most students answered yes, citing the decades of peace that followed and the lives saved by deterrence. Some answered no, arguing that there should have been a way to defend Earth without such catastrophic consequences. A few answered I don't know, acknowledging that some decisions are too complex for simple judgments. All three answers received full marks. 50 years after the incident, a young historian from a species that had not yet existed as a spacefaring civilization when the Zitharan fleet disappeared, came to interview one of the last surviving officers from Earth Strategic Defense Command, who had been involved in the exclusion net's creation. "Do you regret it?" the historian asked. "Building something so destructive?" The old officer, her hair now white and her hands shaking with age, considered the question for a long time. "Every day," she finally said, "and not at all, both at the same time." "How is that possible?" "Because we built the exclusion net knowing it would either save Earth or destroy our souls," she replied. "We succeeded in the first goal. We gave humanity safety, sovereignty, and time to develop without constant threats. But we paid a price for that safety. We became the species that other species fear. Not respect, fear. And that fear has isolated us in ways we never anticipated." "But you would do it again?" "Yes. Because the alternative was to remain vulnerable, to invite constant testing, to fight war after war until eventually someone succeeded in destroying us. We chose a different path. We chose to make one terrible example that would prevent 1,000 smaller tragedies. The math says we made the right choice, but math does not account for the weight of 500,000 names." The historian published the interview as part of a larger work examining how the exclusion net had changed galactic politics. The book's title was simple: The Warning That Changed Everything. It became a bestseller across hundreds of worlds, translated into thousands of languages, studied by diplomats, historians, and military strategists. Its central thesis was that the incident at Earth's exclusion zone represented a fundamental turning point in galactic civilization, the moment when technological deterrence proved more effective than numerical superiority. But the book's final chapter was titled The Cost of Peace, and it focused not on strategy or politics, but on the human cost of what had been done. The crew of the Cassandra who had volunteered to deliver a final warning. The Zitharan officers who had followed orders into oblivion. The families on both sides who lost loved ones. The burden carried by those who had designed, authorized, and deployed the exclusion net. "In the end," the historian wrote, "the question is not whether Earth was justified in defending its borders. The question is what kind of galaxy we want to live in, one where boundaries are respected because of fear, or one where boundaries are respected because we recognize each other's right to exist unmolested. Earth gave us the first. It is up to us to build the second." A century after the Zitharan fleet vanished, the exclusion zone still existed, still functioned, still maintained its absolute boundary. But the galaxy around it had evolved. Young species no longer faced constant aggression from established empires. Boundaries were recognized and respected. Warnings were heeded. The automatic assumption that superior military force guaranteed success had been replaced by a more cautious understanding that any species, given sufficient motivation and creativity, could develop defenses that made conventional warfare obsolete. It was not a perfect galaxy. Conflicts still occurred. Species still competed and sometimes fought. But the nature of that competition had changed, and the change could be traced directly to a simple message that still stood at the edge of human space: stay out. 2 words that had taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. In Earth's capital, in a quiet garden dedicated to peace, stood a monument that few outside humanity ever saw. It listed the names of everyone who had been involved in creating the exclusion net, from the scientists who developed the theory, to the engineers who built the platforms, to the politicians who authorized deployment. Below the names, a final inscription: "We did what we believed necessary to ensure humanity's survival. History will judge whether we were right. We can only hope that future generations will live in a galaxy where such weapons are no longer needed. Until that day, we stand guard. We maintain the boundary, and we remember the price of peace." Above the monument, The stars shone down silent and eternal, marking the paths of countless ships that traveled the galaxy, all of them carefully avoiding one small region of space where 300 warships had entered and never returned. The warning remained. The boundary stood, and the galaxy had learned to listen.